All right, what a time it is coming off a great week, really. Over the weekend, the sweep of the Giants in pretty overwhelming fashion, and then like a very Octoberish type of series against the Astros. Padres take 2 of 3. Magic numbers dwindling. Lots of good signs. The staff has been shoving, and you got the White Sox coming in, and so a chance to take another significant step towards the playoffs, and maybe even pop some bottles this weekend at Petco Park, which would be a lot of fun to see. No Derek for today's pod, enjoying a day off before what could be a busy, hopefully a very busy, coming up next month or so of Padres coverage. So hopefully get a chance to catch up with him on Monday. Thinking we'll do a Monday pod with that being the day off. They could clinch by then, and then going into Dodgers and D-backs. So hopefully you have a chance to, excuse me, catch up for another pod on Monday, but excited about today's guest, who I'll let you know about here in a moment. Thanks to OG's, a sponsor of the On Friar podcast. Appreciate all they do for us and for the NBC7 sports team. OG's a fantastic place to watch whatever your sport of choice is. If you're not able to make it out to Petco Park, or if you're catching some of these road games coming up, do it at OG's. Tons of TVs, and obviously college football Saturdays, NFL Sundays. OG's is the place to be. Awesome menu and a terrific beer list. So shout out to OG's and all they do for the On Friar podcast. Without further ado, the walk-up music. It is the On Friar podcast, brought to you by NBC7. As I mentioned, no Derek, no Todd today, but excited about today's guest, the guy I've been looking forward to connecting with for a little while now, and glad we're finally able to do so. You know him as Rumors and Rants on Twitter. Ryan Phillips, doing work for Sports Illustrated these days. Probably recognize his work from the big lead as well. And one of my favorite followers or follows, I should say, on Padres Twitter.
Goes both ways.
One of my favorite followers as well. And so, yeah, excited to do this. I've appreciated and enjoyed your perspective. Always honest and insightful, and glad we have a chance to catch up with you. And you joked, like, I mean, this is how the world works these days. You meet people over a live stream podcast, and this is what we're doing. So enjoyed getting a chance to touch base a little bit with you and talk some Padres. How are you, Ryan?
Yeah, officially nice to meet you. I mean, that's basically where we're at. But feels like it's been a long time. We've been talking for years, and to finally get on to do this. But no, thanks for having me on. I'll be obviously really excited to do it.
Yeah. Happy to have you on, and figure this is a great time to do it too. Just with the team, the way the team has been trending, kind of the race sort of tightens up a little bit. I feel like I went to September like, all right, they got this thing pretty much locked up, not officially, but in really good shape. And then they kind of play 500 ball for a couple weeks. The race tightens up. You're within kind of a couple games here or there. And then this felt kind of like a statement week for the Padres. You go on the road, you're facing Bob Melvin's team, you sweep them, you got the Astros coming in. Like, this very easily could have been a week where you look up and you're like, all right, we got the White Sox coming up, but we really got some work to do. And they do have some work to do, whether it be for the wild card or potentially for the division. But it felt like a bit of like either a sigh of relief type of week, or like a statement kind of planting their flag, like we are a playoff team type of week. How do you feel about what we've seen here?
Yeah, I mean, after losing 3 of 4 at one point with the Seattle and the end of the San Francisco series, you felt like, okay, what's going on here, guys? Things had been trending so well for so long, and I think that early, about a month and a half ago, Arizona was really pushing, and you felt like, okay, just hang on to a last wild card spot. Then they get going, they kind of get themselves in a good position. You see the Dodgers start to lose guys, start to fall back. You're kind of eyeing that division lead, and then you go through that stretch, and that was sort of okay, now you're going on the road to San Francisco. Players traditionally they either play really well or really poorly, and so it's not the Rockies. They don't just fall apart, but they sometimes they struggle up there, and to go in there and get a pretty easy sweep was, you had to feel good coming into that Astros series. But again, with a team like the Astros, a playoff team, you don't know what it's going to be like. Are their pitchers just going to step up? Are the Padres going to be able to get what they need from everybody? And for the most part, they should have won all 3 games, frankly. And they took 2 out of 3. That's what you can ask when you're playing a really good team like that, is to just win the series. And so, yeah, right now you feel really good, and you look up the road and at the Dodgers, and it's 3.5 right now, and they, lose Glasnow for the season. You don't know what their pitching staff is going to look like at all. Yamamoto's back, but he's pitched 8 innings in like 4 months or 3 months. And so really, this is an opportunity the Padres have not had in a long time to finish this strong. Now, I don't think anyone is expecting them to win the division at this point. You're far enough back where a lot of things have to go right for that to happen. You are going to play 2 playoff teams in the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks down the stretch, but you have to feel really good about where they are to keep that number 1 wild card spot. And then that means you're hosting games in the playoffs. So I think that they're in a really good spot right now. And I don't think it looked like this was going to be the team they were going to have about 3 months ago when they couldn't get away from 500. And so I think everybody's got to be really excited about where they are, how they're playing too. The pitching is really stepping up. The offense has continued to roll. The bullpen is everyone's fallen into their role. They're one of the most dangerous teams in baseball. And look, as a native San Diegan, saying that out loud it just makes me shudder, because it means, okay, what's going to go wrong? But this is a team that has proven itself over and over and over again over the last few months, and they look dangerous moving ahead.
Yeah, you say a few things I want to touch on. Robbie, though, chiming in. Ryan has some great Padres takes on, I can't say X, on Twitter. Shout out Robbie, satisfied customer. And Tyler chiming in as well. If you're in the chat, let us know how you're feeling. We'll get to your thoughts, as we always do on the pod. You mentioned being a native San Diegan and this all feeling, probably a little strange and new, even in spite of what we saw in 2022. 2020 was obviously kind of a weird year, maybe waiting for the other shoe to drop. But have you been able to just kind of like at least appreciate like the environment that we have? Like, no matter what happens from here on out, nobody can control that. Last year was so tough because you see all these sellouts and then you saw the product on the field, and it was often a bummer. To have this team that has coalesced so well, and this fan base that is so passionately behind them, and they're booing Jose Altuve with all they got. They're celebrating back-to-back homers. It's overstated, but the vibes are immaculate. Like it's just been an incredible thing to kind of witness. And look, I'm not a San Diego native, and I feel the excitement from others, and I would imagine that's something that's coursing through your veins as well.
It's hard not to get caught up in it. It really is. And my girlfriend and I went to a game. She had never been. She'd gone to other parks, she's Bay Area native, had gone to Oracle Park and all that, and we went. It was her first time, and it was a sellout. It was a game Musgrove had like a 1-hitter against the Mets for a while, and just the crowd was insane. She's turning, she's like, this is crazy, like, not what she expected. And that's how I feel every time I go, because I remember the days when it was half full at best. I mean, I went to the opening game at Petco, and it was a great atmosphere. And then I remember 4 years after that feeling like, I wish we just had a full stadium. And for the last couple of years, that's what the Padres have had. And the fan support has been incredible, but the fan support has been incredible because they've invested in the team. And, it's proving the fact, if you put a good product on the field, people will show up. And Peter Seidler, was big into that idea. And this is what he has produced, not just this team, but this atmosphere and the way the city has embraced the team. It's different, man. I mean, we always were Padres fans, but this is like, it's the place to be right now. Petco on a Tuesday night is the place in San Diego to be, and all the other nights as well, quite frankly. But it's just, I mean, there is a buzz around this team. There was a buzz in 2022. 2020, honestly, one of my favorite Padres teams because of the way the offense played and all that. It was a tough season because you didn't get to go watch them. But so I think that this team in particular, though, has captured people's imagination because they've been how good they've been in clutch situations, how many guys have stepped up who are just so likable and maybe you didn't expect. I mean, from Profar to Merrill to, all these guys that just are having these seasons that weren't expected. and they look like they're having fun, and it's hard not to feel like you're having fun when those guys are. It's infectious. It really, really is, and it's been just a blast to watch, and it's been a blast to be there as well.
Yeah, they look like they're having a ton of fun. They look like they genuinely like each other,
Yeah.
which hasn't always, appeared to be the case in the
Let's
past.
not
And
talk about it, please. It's
no, we can leave that behind us. And I just think like you're seeing more and more from the fan base, just like we have to make sure we're enjoying this. And I think that that's sometimes
don't
hard
take it
as
for granted.
fans. Yeah, because you're like, so are we going to make the playoffs? What does the matchup look like? Can we get home field? Then the fact of the matter is like, I like this setup more than the 1 game wild card, but like a 3 game wild card series is also a little bit cruel,
Yeah.
and like one or two, breaks that don't go your way can end your season, even if you maybe are the best team, or even if you got things going in a good direction. It's just hard to really project, and I think it is so important now to like you've got 3 series, 9 games left in the regular season. Just like enjoy this ride, enjoy having a chance to clinch, enjoy maybe pushing the Dodgers for the division, and then, just go nuts when it's time to, get ready for it and enjoy a playoff game, because you just don't know. And I've said this so many times, like there haven't been a whole lot of just genuinely enjoyable stretches of Padres regular season baseball. And
Trust me,
since
I know. It's
you guys, and but even just like in my short time, I guess this is my 6th season, like covering this team, it's been really fleeting, even in the good years. And to be in the spot, to have a really likable, energetic team that goes about it the right way, that just never dies, and has a lot of guys that are really easy to pull for. It's just fun, and I'm excited for the fan base. I was talking to Will Holder last night, saw him at a SDFC event, and he was just like over the moon about this team and so excited about the way they've come together and how likable they are. And it's just really, really fun. And hopefully there's like more electric moments like we saw in 2022. That part isn't guaranteed. But you can just enjoy every bit of the ride in the meantime, and hopefully it's one that lasts long. But this is a team that like deserves, I think, kind of the support that fans have been giving them, and just kind of just the excitement that comes with having your team playing the way it is, like at this stage of the season.
Yeah, I think this team has earned the crowds, where I felt last year's team
Yeah,
didn't really earn the
that's a great
crowds.
way of putting
And
it. Yep.
I think that heading into this season, tickets were sold and all of that stuff. But as the season's gone along, people have attached to this team, and have really, a kid like Merrill hitting so many clutch hits, that inspires you. I mean, that's crazy. He's 21 years old, and he's having these incredible moments. Profar, who everybody loves. I mean, everybody's loved Profar since he was here, but to see that guy finally break through and succeed, and people are attached to that. Seeing Manny really struggle at the beginning of the year and then get healthy, and all of a sudden you look at his numbers, and it's incredible that he's, for the first month or 6 weeks of the season, he was saying out loud, like, I can't do the things I want to do because I'm still hurt. And he's going to end up with 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, like all of those. Seeing Tatis come back from an injury and play the way he's playing, being exciting again. I mean, all the Higashioka out of nowhere, I mean, like there's so many little pieces to this team that build up to make something so great. It's been really rewarding to watch, and I'm sure it's been rewarding for them to see the fans respond to it. And I mean, Petco is going to be nuts in the playoffs. Assuming they get home games, it's going to be nuts in the playoffs.
You mentioned Manny, and friend of the program, Jim Russell, has referenced this Manny quote often. And I believe he tweeted it July 5th. So somewhere around that time, I thought there was, in June, but I might be wrong. But this quote from Manny, I believe to Kevin AC in the Union Tribune, I got to do it. I absolutely got to play. I'm expletive frustrated. I'm expletive pissed. I can't get there. I do think I found it. I think we made a couple adjustments that got me in the right direction, but I just can't get there. I got to get there. It's expletive frustrating. I know it's going to be there. I'm just too expletive good. I have to figure it out. I will figure it out. Even if I blow my expletive elbow out again, I will figure it out. And, I don't know. Is that his Tim Tebow moment?
Seems that way. It
right?
does seem that way. I mean, because
from that point, I mean, really from like July or June, like 26 on. And I know the broadcast showed the graphic of Manny's numbers from like July 27th on. And I think that's when he really kind of sort of went nuts. Yeah, since July 27th, 46 games, hitting 323, OPS over 1,000, 16 homers, 51 RBIs, 28 extra base hits. He was hitting 287 with an 849 OPS basically the month before that. So he was, now 3 straight months of Manny playing like MVP level baseball. And I think you hit it right on the head. Like, there's been so much chatter about Manny, his leadership, his hustle, this and that. But I think maybe you saw it a lot in 2022 in that MVP campaign. He busts his ankle, he barely misses any time, and he's kind of the steady heartbeat for that team. Obviously, last year, down year, struggles going into this year. Some of the questions pop up. He's blowing a bubble and, while running to first base, and everybody loses their minds. But all the while, the guy just keeps showing up, and we've gotten a better sense of just how much it means for him, and also like the impact that he has on the team, the way he leads by example, the influence that has in the clubhouse, and then to see it click for him on the field has been pretty inspiring and really cool to see, and hopefully quiet some of the chatter around Manny whenever he does like the one thing that seems to trigger people.
Well, I'll say this. Nobody in that locker room ever questioned him. I mean, you talk to people around the team. Nobody, the outside voices and stuff, like to these guys, it doesn't matter. It really, I think it annoys them at times, but it doesn't really matter. And he is one of those guys. He and Musgrove, and there are a couple other guys in that locker room. Bogart's even to another extent. The guys in the locker room don't question them because they've done it before. And those are qualities that he has, is the fact that he does show up every day. Even if he's not playing well, he's in the lineup. And that's something he takes pride in. He's talked about before. He probably should take more days off in a year, honestly, but he doesn't because he wants to be out there. And I think he's a guy also who doesn't want to DH for like 5 days in a row, to get rest. He wants to be in the field. He wants to be impacting the game. And with Manny, you can talk about, so many people, he's grinding into a bunch of double plays at one point, and that was a narrative. And he's not really doing anything. They signed him to this big contract. It's over. Look at the end of the year. Look at the numbers at the end of the year. I mean, the guy figures it out. He's as good. I mean, he's one of the best players in baseball at the end of the day, and he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. All of that, and those guys just show up. They do, and there may be stretches where it looks bad. But in the end, it's going to always even out, and they're always going to be those guys, unless, of course, they're severely injured as he was last year. And he's also a guy who plays through injuries and has that would sideline everybody else. He's a guy who takes pride in that and who shows up, and that rubs off on other guys, and it rubs off on other players. And you look at also just the way that other guys respond to him on the team. And he is the leader. And I think, again, a guy like Musgrove is a big time leader, and there's some other guys that show leadership qualities, but I mean, that's his clubhouse. And to see the way this team is playing unquestionably with him as the leader is a testament to him.
Yeah, no doubt. Rafa says, Steph Curry, we will figure this out vibes as well. Tyler saying Padres have proved time and time again that they can win series against contenders, and that's all it takes in the postseason. Last series L was August 16th, just a positive nugget. They did drop the series against San Francisco at home, but all that to say, it hasn't happened very often. And I do think that's another good point. With the Astros, Manny saying against a team we'll see again. Every so
that was
often,
a little bold for me. It was that was a little bold for me.
It's hard to tell is this a bold statement, or is he just like, is he slipping a little bit? Is he maybe being too honest without realizing it in the moment? But I do like that. And somebody, AJ Cassavell, was like, well, there's only one situation where you could see him again. And he's like, well, you guys know the situation, the goal, what we're shooting for. And so he did kind of double down in a sense. But I like that from Manny. And Astros, obviously what they've done this year against the Dodgers, what they did against the Braves, which could obviously help them if things tighten up with Atlanta in the next week. The Phillies have been kind of that one team that has seemed like, when you talk about the National League is wide open, but like the but is for Philly. And obviously
Yeah.
Philly, like history has been in the Phillies' favor as it pertains to the series with the Padres recently. And
They own the
another,
Padres. Let's be honest. They own the Padres right now. In the way the Dodgers used to own the Padres, the Phillies own the Padres right now, and the matchups are not great. That's the team you look at across the National League, and you can lose to anybody anytime. As you mentioned, the playoffs are nothing's guaranteed in the playoffs, and we've seen it year over year in baseball. Top seeded teams drop to wild card teams all the time. You see a team like Arizona make a run to the World Series. All of that happens seemingly every year. But if you're looking at the landscape, the Phillies are the team you're staring across the table at, just like, please don't pick us. Please don't play us. But yeah, they got a chip on their shoulder from 2022. A lot of the same guys on that team would like to get some revenge there.
Yeah. And, just thinking in terms of kind of like the playoff bracket, Dodger or Padres, Diamondback. I mean, if we assume Padres are in that 4-5 type series, say they take that last wild card or the first wild card, I should say, then you're looking at facing the top seed there, which at the moment would be Philly. But they're just one game up on LA. So it's interesting kind of considering like the math, like you could push the Dodgers, but would you rather be in a situation where maybe the Dodgers get that top seed, you're playing in essentially the 4-5, have a chance to then play, if my math is right, play the Dodgers in the division? Like you'd rather play the Dodgers in the DS than the Phillies, and then just wait like we did in 2022. Am I wrong about that?
I think either way, it's going to be tough. Again, the Dodgers pitching has fallen apart, but yes, you'd like somebody else to do the dirty work on the Phillies for you. I think that is the message. But again, you're going to have to go through. I think you're going to have to go through Philadelphia at some point. Maybe you want to catch them in a short series. I think there's some thought to that with the way the Padres pitching is right now. Maybe you steal 2 and you just hope to get the third. It's you got 3 games to get the third. I think that either way, it's going to be tough. I mean, the Dodgers, they're pitching. You don't know what it's going to get, but they've got guys who can go out there and pitch. And their offense, they've got those key guys still, and they got that guy who's going to get 50-50 pretty soon here. And, you're going to have to face them at some point too. So I feel like if you start trying to game it out like that, it almost never works to your favor. You just got to go play your best baseball and continue to play your best baseball. And that gives you the best chance.
And maybe they see Shohei Ohtani on the mound at some point too, which is something that's gotten some discussion lately.
I mean, who else are they going to use? They might have to use him.
They might have to. Yeah, it might be out of necessity. And look, I will say, the Dodgers owned the Padres until they didn't.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's the thing is I think that the confidence they have built against the Dodgers has been, it's again, there's turnover on the roster. It's not everybody's not the same, but there's something franchise wide. The confidence against the Dodgers has changed. And I think that again, once you break through, you're fine, but they just haven't broken through against the Phillies yet.
Yeah. Gustavo chiming in with the rallying cry this time of year. LSGSD all day. So much about this, you kind of touch on like the attitude of the team, and it certainly pertains to the Dodgers, but it's really like kind of pervasive just in their approach to everything, in the sense that it's a little bit of a boring approach, and it's a boring approach that we see often in sports. It reminds me a little bit of when I covered Mike Leach's teams at WSU. He had a very, very boring approach for not a boring guy, which made him, sometimes frustrating and strange to cover, in that he would not put any more stock in an Apple Cup game as he would Portland State to begin the season. And, yesterday was another example. Like Mike Shildt asked, like, hey, you take 2 of 3 against a team like that, in a series that feels Octoberish, like that's got to mean something. And he's like, I get it. I get what you're saying, but we just like one day at a time, one game at a time, respect our opponent, blah, 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 blah. And while that doesn't make for really like re-rackable sound bites, it has kind of created this atmosphere, like this workman-like, businessman-like, approach to the games and to the season, not getting too high, not getting too low. and just kind of taking care of the business in front of you. And I mean, if you listen to Manny Machado, like he echoes a lot of that, like just
Yeah.
like not getting too excited about going back to back to back and like a series that involved like a lot of like wild moments and dramatic highs and lows and all that. And just the steadiness about this team really is different and certainly can serve you well in the postseason. But it's just kind of like a different attitude that Mike Shildt has seemed to kind of ingrain in this club that seems to have really benefited them, especially going back to when it was a bit of a roller coaster, despite what he said to start the season.
Yeah.
But once they got clicking, they've been able to sustain that and not go crazy. They're not celebrating all the time. They're just like, yeah, this is who we are and this is what we should be doing.
Yeah, and I talked to somebody last year associated with the team when they made that run in September and fell short. And he said to me, I said, like, well, you have to feel good about, you made this run at the end of the year, maybe build some momentum to next year. And obviously there's been a ton of roster turnover since then, so it doesn't really necessarily carry over. But he said, yeah, but the problem is we didn't play well early in the season. I was like, yeah, but you played well late. And he said, the games in April count for as much as the ones in September. You got to get those wins too to make the playoffs. And if you'd played better then, you could lose more games in September than you do in April, and it doesn't matter. And I do think that's been a bit of the approach this year, is just win games. And it doesn't matter who you're playing or whatever. And you've seen this team also very much, as you kind of touched on, they don't get intimidated by better teams and just rack up wins against bad teams. It's actually been a thing that they've lost a lot of games they should have won against bad opponents this year and played really well against the good ones. And I think that even approach has something to do with it. I do think they might get up a little more but that's natural with any athlete. When you're, in a playoff type atmosphere, you're going to be more intense. But I do think you're right. It is kind of boring, but I think that has really served this team well, that they always feel like, and with that, they always feel like they're in games. I mean, they've come back down from like 7-0 or 8-0 this year and won a game. I mean, they always feel like they're in the game. They feel like, look, it's 27 outs. Until the 27th out, it's not over. And you love when a team is like that. And it feels like the exact opposite of last year. And that there is always an opportunity to come back. The other team has to beat you. It's not you losing. It's the other team actually has to beat you. And with how good this offense has been, how good the pitching has been, what the bullpen can do now, that's true. Other teams do look at the Padres and see, we have to beat them. They're not going to beat themselves. And that, when I talk to even people who aren't associated with the Padres, just national baseball people, like, they're scary. They are a scary team to look at. And again, hearing that, immediately my heart starts fluttering as a Padres fan. It's like, all right, what's going to go wrong? Who are we losing? But it's true that the Padres on paper and in the way they play look like a scary team right now, because there aren't the flaws on the roster that other teams have.
Yeah, I think between like the roster construction and just what you mentioned in terms of their habit of coming back, and I don't know what the stat is anymore, but they were for a while they had more 4+ run innings than any other team in the league.
Yep.
Started with that Cubs comeback when they're down 8-0. You're like, oh, maybe this is going to be like who they are, wishful thinking. And as it turns out, this is very much who they are. They get down big and it doesn't matter. A couple big
they're up
swings.
there in clutch situations. Their batting average is really high. Runners in scoring position with 2 outs. I mean, all those things that they didn't do last year, they're near the top in this year. It feels night and day.
I'm going to make a crazy comparison, and I'm not saying they are these teams, but like if this shows up in the playoffs, there might be that feel between the bullpen, between the clutch hitting, late game heroics, ability to come back. It's like, especially those early like Chiefs Mahomes teams. Remember that Texans game when they were down like 24 or something like that, and they wiped
and the
off
Texans were basically celebrating. Texans
Yeah.
were celebrating at halftime. Yeah.
and the Chiefs were up, if not by halftime, then early in the third quarter. Or this one's for Rafa, like those Warriors teams where like if you're not up by 40 at halftime, you're gonna lose.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying. And the Padres aren't there, don't get me wrong. But you can maybe see like hints of that, like what they've done in late games, how the way they've bolstered their bullpen, and just the fight and the belief. And as Shildt says, grit squad. Like that's shown up, and that should serve them really, really well.
no matter what the score is, if they put a couple runs on the board, I tend to feel like, oh, they got a shot here.
Yeah.
It's even if they're down 6 runs, if they put 3 on the board at any point in the game, you feel like they could get another 3. I mean, it's and the thing I like about them is how many different ways they can beat you. They can beat you with an all singles inning. They can beat you with the long ball. They can go back to back to back like they did yesterday to basically seal a game. They can, double you to death. They can, hustle out a ground ball in the infield. There's so many different ways they can beat you. And a lot of teams are pretty one-dimensional. There are some great offenses in the league that can do everything as well, but they just it doesn't always look the same when they make a comeback. And just like with the pitching, it doesn't always look the same, but they seem to figure it out and get there. Whether it's a big strikeout game or it's a lot of balls in play, like you saw with Darvish the other night. I mean, it's different every time, and the fact that there are multiple ways to beat you means that they can beat multiple different types of teams too, which is what makes them even more dangerous.
All right, so let's flip it. Since you have that long-suffering San Diego fan deep inside of you that wants to be like, hey, we're still here. We haven't changed. What is the thing that, aside from like a random freak injury or that sort of thing,
Right.
like give me a thing about the team that when you're having a tough time falling asleep at night is like, well, man, if that creeps up, that could be a problem.
I think it's going to be the innings for the pitchers. Darvish has not thrown a lot this year. Musgrove still has a thing in his elbow that feels better but isn't healed. And then King is so far over his innings limit. And then Cease really throwing as much as he's ever thrown. That's my concern, is the starting pitching staying healthy. Now, again, Darvish hasn't thrown a lot, so he's pretty fresh if he's back.
Yeah.
But again, not a long track record this year, not a lot of time to work out kinks before the playoffs start. And again, sort of the same for Musgrove. He's been great since he's been back mostly, except for one game where he may have been tipping his pitches. Other than that, he's been pretty darn good, but that elbow could flare up at any time. So I think that's the one thing, is against playoff caliber offenses, can King be sharp despite his innings limit? Is Cease sometimes is utterly dominant as he was yesterday, or you can give up some runs early, kind of get behind, throw a lot of pitches, then you're taxing the bullpen early. Then when you need that bullpen the next night in the playoffs, are they ready to go? And then, Darvish and Musgrove. Again, you're nitpicking at that point because all 4 of those guys can win you games in the playoffs, and there's not really a hole as far as somebody who's really struggled. But of those guys, can they all maintain their level for the next month and a half? Essentially. And that's the one thing that bothers me. I think the offense is going to play in the playoffs. Again, they're guys, they beat you in a bunch of different ways, seeing a lot of pitches, getting contact early, power, gap stuff, like getting into the gaps, all of that, I think helps you. The other thing is, and it reared its head yesterday, but shortstop defense is, can Bogarts hold up at shortstop? Because I think their best lineup has Solano at first base, Jake at second, Cronenworth at second, and Bogarts at short. But defensively, that leaves some question marks. So hadn't really shown up until yesterday.
Yeah. Speaking of Will Holder, he was on Twitter trying to, make himself feel better or sort through his emotions about the possibility of Ha-seong Kim coming back, and like, what do you do in a situation like that? And I think Derek and I spoke about that a little bit last week. And I think we're both on like, the side of like, probably stick with what you got and maybe err on like the offensive upside rather than the defensive upside. Is that kind of
hope your pitching holds guys down and it doesn't hurt you that much? I would agree. And then maybe late in games,
defensive substitution,
put him in as a defensive substitution or speed or something, even if you have to rotate it over and keep Bogarts at second and move Cronenworth to first or something like that. I think that you do need to get Kim into games defensively late if you're winning. But his bat has been so unreliable this year. And I know if you're looking at WAR and certain metrics, like he's actually been very valuable because of his defense. But I think in the postseason, you can't have a hole in your lineup like that. And so he's done it before in the playoffs. He's hit, he's had big hits in the playoffs for the Padres before in 2022, but I do think you need Bogarts' bat there. He's a guy who's been there before. He's been solid since he came off the injury for the most part. And you're just going to have to grit your teeth with him at shortstop for the most part. That's my feeling, unless you come up on a bad matchup for Solano.
Yeah. Gustavo was asking about the rotation in the bullpen, and you talk about innings, and the bullpen comes to mind because we're just kind of coming out of a stretch, and there's been multiple stretches even since the deadline when they kind of built up the back end of the bullpen, where you see those innings start to pick up and see guys have to pitch a couple days in a row and adjust their approach, and you maybe have a different guy kind of in a leverage spot that you wouldn't necessarily want him in. And then when you consider like what playoff baseball is often like, where if you have a guy that goes 7 innings, it almost feels like he threw a complete game.
Yeah.
Because so often, a manager, and Mike Shildt has erred on the side of, I'm going to pull you a batter or inning too early rather than too late.
Which is Melvin did the opposite.
Melvin was the opposite. He gave his guys a ton of leash. Sometimes it worked out and sometimes to his own detriment. And so it makes me think, okay, once they get into those tight situations, is Mike Shildt going to feel a little bit antsy in the 4th inning with a cease or a king if they give up a hit and a walk or what have you? And then you are running into a situation where you're taxing the bullpen a little bit. Robert Suarez hasn't looked like his dominant self to the same extent lately, although Monday took care of business in impressive fashion. So, that's another thing. And like everybody's having to do this calculus and everybody's asking these questions. It's not a,
it's not just a Padres problem. Yeah.
No, not at all. And they're probably fairly well equipped to handle that problem, but it just makes you think like, or worry about a situation where, maybe you get into the NLDS and guys have racked up some innings and you've had to use your bullpen, and maybe you're the second time through, or you're getting towards the end of the first kind of time through with the rotation. Do you run into a spot where you've taxed the bullpen a little bit? You need to push the starters maybe more than you're comfortable doing. Could that potentially lead to a situation where you don't feel great about what you have in terms of your resources, and that sort of thing obviously can cost you in a big way?
Well, I'm going to say something now that people are going to jump on, but I think Martin Perez could be really maybe the most valuable pitcher the Padres have in the postseason, because he can sit out there and give you the option if a guy is struggling early to pick up some innings. And because he's probably going to be moved to the bullpen for the playoffs. And you would assume that if somebody gets just racked in the 2nd inning, you can put them out there for 4 innings to eat it up and save your bullpen. And those guys in the postseason are incredibly valuable, because you've got to come out the next night with those bullpen guys you've used and try and get them out there. I wouldn't move Suarez. I think that's his role. That's his position. Jason Adams has been the best pitcher on the staff. Since he arrived, even including some of the starters who have been great, he's been the best pitcher on the staff. Tanner Scott has been good, but Adam has surpassed him in my opinion, but he's a lefty you can use. Hoeing's been really good. Morahone has finally become the guy that I think a lot of people thought he would be when they signed him back in the day. So they have weapons in that pen. I think it's true that, some of those guys like Estrada too has pitched a lot this year compared to what traditionally he had done. So you're sort of navigating some things there, but I think that they're well set up in the bullpen. I think you move Perez to the bullpen as well and give him some length there. You're just going to have to roll with it. I don't think there's any changes to roles that will happen other than that. I think that Suarez is your closer, and he's going to be your closer, but you've got those other guys to help out. Maybe this time if Bryce Harper is up against you, you don't have Suarez pitch to him, you have Tanner Scott pitch to him, and then you put Suarez in. But I think the thing about it is there's so much more depth this year than they've had in recent years on offensively and in the bullpen. You have so much more depth. I mean, being able to have Solano on your bench all year has been it feels like a luxury the Padres haven't had in 5 years, to have a really good, bench bat to go to. And so I do think you have ways to mix and match matchups, and you're going to be able to have some depth there that they haven't had in the past, where you've had 1 or 2 guys who can go that you feel confident in. And other than that, you're just praying every time somebody gets out of that bullpen.
Yeah, Robbie's saying Matsui hasn't pitched in over a week. Is he part of the playoff roster? I'd like to keep Reynolds, who I believe Reynolds is in El Paso right now, if I'm not mistaken.
He came up, and then did they send him back? I didn't notice. Maybe last week.
I believe so. And then Brian Hoeing hasn't pitched since last Wednesday in Seattle either. And I think that's just kind of like a assume just a situational thing.
Yeah.
Haven't really had the need for him, but he's another guy that could give you some innings and be kind of in that, not necessarily a swing role, but that long relief type of
Could pick
guy.
up some innings. Yeah.
Yeah. So if a Michael King is having a tough time in the fourth inning, maybe he gets you through the fifth or sixth or something like that. So yeah, it's interesting. Thinking back to 2022, it was the big three of Darvish, Musgrove, and Snell, and then two other starts.
Well, and to be fair, Snell had been up and down all season that year. And so
Yeah.
you towards the end of the year, he got better, but you still had that thing in the back of your mind, like, what is he going to be throwing strikes, or is he going to walk four guys in the first two innings and then get you behind the eight ball? So it really was Darvish and Musgrove, and then just kind of a shrug after that.
But all that to say, like, you really have three guys that you're kind of riding. Now, we didn't see them get to the World Series and how that might, obviously 7-game series, expand your rotation a little bit. But, Clevenger lost in LA, I believe, game one. And then again, Philly between he and Manaea, unable to get the job done. And so, like, I'm curious, how would you stack up the rotation or prioritize those guys when like, okay, potential of a 3-game series, no guarantee. The fourth guy maybe starts game one of the DS,
right?
Maybe game two, depending on what happens. And then you probably don't see him again as a starter. I don't know. They didn't get to 5 games against the Dodgers. And so, that plays into it as well. But knowing that you're going to have 3 main guys, another starter, but that guy might need to be willing to like come out the pen in the right situation. It's been such a strange year. And you mentioned Snell, and I'm glad you did, because like you felt goodish about second half Snell, but then postseason, different ball game. And so Michael King, first year as a starter. Now you're a starter in the postseason when, like you said, you pushed your innings limit. Dylan Cease, obviously Joe and Darvish have been there. But like, how do guys handle those situations? It's not just like filling out a spreadsheet and we need to cover these innings. Like, you got to cover it with the right guys that are going to be like comfortable in that setting as well. And not to say those other guys won't, but we haven't seen it. We haven't really seen it.
I would be very surprised if he finishes strong if Musgrove is not the game one starter. Just given leadership, he's been there before. He's pitching well. Cease is probably on paper your number one, right now, but the luxury of being able to throw him in game two is extremely high. If Musgrove can give you 6 really good innings in game one, I think it'll be between those two guys for the game one starter, but I wouldn't be surprised if Musgrove gets the nod out of respect, basically. And the fact that he was so good in the postseason last time. And then I think it's going to depend how Darvish looks at the end of the year, whether he gets that third starter role and how he feels, honestly. And I think he's a guy who will be pretty honest about how he feels if he can do it, if he can go 6 strong innings and feels like he's got it. King has pitched out of the bullpen last year. I think that he makes more sense as the fourth starter swing guy. Maybe if you get in a 7-game series, you get a 2-game lead. Maybe you feel the luxury of, okay, let's give him game 3 and rest everybody else an extra day or something. Feel that out somehow. But he's used to coming out of the pen. Might be weird for him, having not done it in a while. But managers, especially like Shildt, tend to defer to veterans. And I think that kind of shapes up as the way to go, especially when you consider King and the innings limit and how far he is. And there have been some starts he started the game and does not look sharp, and then he'll kind of over the last couple starts, and then he'll kind of lock in as it goes, and not sharp in the way that he's giving anything up, but just not hitting his spots as crisply as he has this year. Maybe the slider is going a little too far out of the zone, the fastball is up. He's got good enough stuff where he can get away with it, but you can't afford to have long innings early in the postseason. And if he's doing that and trending in that way, maybe it's better to have him come out of the pen.
Dylan Cease does have 2 2/3 innings of postseason experience back in 2020. Second year.
We're all good then.
Picks.
Well, he just passed his highest innings total, I think, last start. So,
and yeah, both came in relief. So a little bit of a different between 20 and 21, I should say. So a different situation for him.
slightly.
But yeah, he's there's boom and bust is probably too dramatic. Boom, certainly I wouldn't say bust, but just like, okay, we're not necessarily getting prime Dylan Cease right now. But when he has that look as he did on Wednesday, you're like, okay, this guy, between just how devastatingly good his stuff is, his ability to miss bats, or miss, like significant contact and pitch to contact effectively, which allowed him to be really, really efficient. Where you're like, oh wow, he's through 6 innings on 72 pitches or something crazy like that. Like,
And
so
he's when he's efficient, you're like, where did this come from? Because he's a
yeah,
strikeout pitcher, which they tend to have
sure.
higher pitch counts. But when you look up and it's a 6 inning, he's got 70 pitches. You're like not
I was
expecting that.
I was meaning to do this math because, when we were talking about him coming over from the White Sox, it was like, okay, when we talked to Ryan McGuffey, who covers the White Sox for NBC Sports Chicago, where he was like, the one thing that, like, the one step he now needs to take is like consistently going deeper in games. And,
Sounds a lot
he
like Blake Snell.
sounds a lot like Blake Snell, right? And, I want to say he was averaging like 5 1/3 innings per start or something like that. And I've been meaning to do the math and trying to do so now on the podcast. Probably isn't the best idea, but
We're
I think
journalists, not math majors. There's a reason we went into this and not the other thing. It's
based on what we've seen, certainly having the no hitter and then yesterday pitching into the ninth. Like he's made that step. He's shown the ability that he can do that, and so that's certainly a good sign. But I just find kind of the whole rotation matrix, even more so than like the whole Suarez situation and whatnot, and what they do with the bullpen, really fascinating because you could make arguments for different guys for different reasons to be like, yes, we are, they will 100% pitch this series, whether it's the wild card, whether it's
yeah.
obviously the NLDS, but guys that you want like games 1 and 2 and then potentially seeing again later in the series. It's hard to really know like what the best choice is.
And I do think that the situation for both Darvish and Musgrove is unique because of how much time both of them missed. It really, I mean, it could be completely different than we think it is based on how they're feeling and how the staff feels about them at that point. I mean, I could see a scenario where Musgrove is number 3 because they're just, let's not put as much pressure on that arm as we're thinking. But I have a hard time seeing him not start game 1.
Yeah. I another thing that I thought, and watching Fernando in Tuesday's loss, ninth inning, just a not a very good at bat with a game
Nope.
on the line and then a chance for him to potentially tie or win it. And then he bounces back in a big way with the homer on Wednesday, which was good to see. But something that I feel like we're not really talking about is the fact that like his last playoff experience is in 2020. Like I
Yep.
think we all know this, but I feel like that's worth mentioning, because he's been asked a lot about being in these situations and this and that. 2021, he had just a supersonic season despite the injuries, but obviously things went the way they did for his team. Obviously, 2022, last year he comes back, and now like, what is it like for him? How does he handle these situations? And Tuesday night in a game that felt like a playoff game, felt like a playoff type situation in the ninth inning, looked way too excited the first pitch he saw, and then kind of I think the one bugaboo he's had is like anything that's dying low and away from him, like
That's been his career.
spam him with that, and you might have good results, knowing how dangerous he is at the plate. I'm just really curious, like how he handles the excitement, the emotions of it, the ups and downs. Obviously, like if I mention the 2020 playoffs, like what's the first image that comes to mind?
Oh, it's the home runs against the Cardinals, right?
It's the home runs against the Cardinals. So he's done it. He's proven it.
Yeah.
But I just, a subplot that I find kind of interesting as we enter back into this, knowing the type of like emotional, high, low type player he is and how much he can like lift the spirits of this team. Now, he's not the only one doing it anymore. Manny Machado is, like you said, the captain, the leader. Jackson Merrill is a spark plug in his own respect. Other guys have been that as well.
Profar.
Profar, certainly. But Fernando Tatis Jr. has been that guy. And so I just, I'm curious how that's going to play out for him internally, emotionally, and then what that looks like on the field.
It's going to be interesting, honestly. I do think there's less pressure on him because of
Yeah.
how much else this team has. But I think he's going to put that pressure on himself to be the guy who lives up to the statute contract and does something big. And I think also when he starts going badly, it looks like he's trying to hit the ball out of the park. And when he's going really well, it looks like he's trying to make hard contact. And those are two things. And maybe it's like he gets a little homer happy and hits a couple in a couple days, and then he's looking to hit it out every time. When it's, sometimes we just need a single from you right now. Just hit the ball hard. Don't worry about anything else. Again, it's less important because you've got the rest of the offense kind of humming right now. But yeah, when he goes bad, he gets strikeout happy, he gets homer happy, and he starts, swinging and missing at that low and away, that slider or fastball low and away. And so, yeah, that's a concern, especially because you've seen it a couple days in a row. You'd love to see him turn around real quick before the postseason starts. But I think he's been really good since he came back and settled into a nice groove. This last couple games, again, kind of, but you love to see what you saw in Seattle, hitting a home run to the opposite field. Doing that kind of stuff is the positive. The negative is kind of overswinging at everything. And so it's about him to dial that in for the playoffs. I don't know how he'll handle it, honestly. He's still, people forget how young he is still. I mean, he feels like he's been around forever now, but he's still super young. You're right. He hasn't been in a playoff game with people in the stands. And so how is that going to affect him? Is he going to get caught up? Is he going to enjoy it? What's it going to be like playing if they go on the road in the playoffs? People are going to let him hear it, after everything he went through. But yeah, I think that's a fascinating subplot for what's going to happen. I just think that the positive is there's not as much pressure on him as there would have been in the past because of how much they're getting out of other guys offensively.
Yeah, that's a great point. 3 games, 11 at-bats in both series in 2020 against the Cardinals and against the Dodgers. Against the Cardinals, 455 average, 571 on base, slugging over 1,000 for a 1662 OPS.
That's decent.
And then against the Dodgers, 11 at-bats, 2 hits to 4 strikeouts, a 182 average, 308 on base, 273 slug, 580 OPS.
Got to beat that. I think he's got to.
You got to be better than that. You need to be better than that. Even if you don't have as much pressure, you need to be better than that. And I think you will. But both sides of that, both extremes they can still be in there.
Of course.
You just hope
he's always going to slump big. When he slumps, he's always going to slump big. And it's just the way guys who are that athletic and dynamic, it tends to be the thing. His swing can get a little long. His patience can wear a little thin. Like there are those things with guys like that, but the highs are so high that it's worth those lows. And it's just, you just hope that the low doesn't come in a key situation.
Sure. Before we get out, anything else that I haven't peppered you with that you find fascinating or interesting or want to wax poetic about this Padres team?
I question the hiring of Mike Shildt. I didn't think he was a bad hire. I thought that's what they would do from the beginning, but I have to give him credit for the way he has managed this team this year. You knock $70 million off the payroll, get rid of your top hitter, and they're far better this year. And some of that belongs to, AJ Preller made some incredible moves. Even just Donovan Solano was sitting at home on his couch, and he's been a key contributor for this team. Jagan Jurickson Profar back for $1 million. Even Martin
Peralta's been big.
Yeah, Peralta's been big, getting Martin Perez, deciding to bring up Jackson Merrill. But Shildt also created a culture on this team that allowed those guys to thrive and survive some times where Manny Machado was not great. They lost their 2 top starting pitchers, for lengthy absences. The bullpen struggled for a while, which is why they made those big moves at the deadline. Yet somehow they've come through it just fine. And if anything, they're as strong as they've been all year. I mean, I know they've kind of played 500 ball for a couple of weeks there recently, but in general, this team is really at its strongest right now as far as roster wise. And Mike Shildt deserves a ton of credit for pulling that team through. Ruben Niebla, the staff, of course, as well. But it's been really interesting to see how this has played out, how Shilt's attitude has really rubbed off on this team, and how they've just risen to the occasion every time they've needed to. They rarely lose games where they don't show up. It's usually, you know, there and
They did that a lot
last
year.
last year it felt like half their losses were just, are they even in the stadium? And this year they make teams work for it. And that's a credit to Shildt. And I think that a lot of people, myself included, who questioned whether that was the right move or whether it was just a comfortable move, were wrong. And eating a little crow on that, and seriously believe that he has been a big part of what has made this team great.
No doubt about it. Great note to end on. Anything you want to plug before we let you go?
Just go to si.com. Follow me on Twitter at Rumors and Rants, and we got lots of good stuff going on in Sports Illustrated right now. So go check it out.
Hey, enjoy the ride. I know it can be hard for you long-suffering San Diego fans, but enjoy these next few weeks.
I will, and hopefully I'll be back here to talk to you about it after it's all over.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Glad we did this, and great to meet you, Ryan.
Yeah, same to you.